Why? I brought you bagels and cream cheese.
Slowly but surely. Slowly, just hanging in there. What's that? Yeah. How you doing? Good. What an ordeal. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm glad you're here. Pretty amazing that you're here. Here we go. Okay. Everything good? Yes. Nice to see you. Okay, here we go. Good Shabbos. Welcome. Okay. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach to anyone who does 2 days of Yantiv, which is probably nobody. Okay. Here we go. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam berit olam V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam berit olam Beini uven b'nei Yisrael Oti leolam, oti leolam V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam berit olam Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai es ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam berit olam Uvayom hashvi shavat v'inafash Shavat v'inafash Shavat v'inafash V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam berit olam Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei peri hagafen Amen L'chaim. No. No. You're welcome to bring your own. Blessing for study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, so today's going to be something totally different. You need the sheets. Hopefully you have them. If you don't have them, it's okay. If you have a phone, because you can go on Safari or something. But what happens is, Shavuot fell Thursday night, Friday. And if you're conservative or Orthodox, you have 2 days of Shavuot. So today is Shavuot for you as well. So I was going to say, today is still a holiday for you if you do 2 days. But yesterday probably wasn't even a holiday for you. So, because Reform Jews don't really do Shavuot. I know that because I'm always in a Reform temple for Shavuot for the last 26 years, and I've noticed that Reform Jews don't generally come. So, but if some of you, although of the people who do come, you're actually the one. This group is actually the ones who do. So here's the issue. In order for us to finish the Torah cycle in the Reform world with the rest of the Jewish world, so that we're on the same Torah portion with the rest of the world, and when we get to Rosh Hashanah, it'll actually be Rosh Hashanah, the rest of the world has no Torah portion this week because it's still Shavuot for them. So they do the Shavuot reading today. Which means to say what the Reform world does is since we've finished Shavuot and we're on to the Torah portion, which is Naso, the Torah portion for us will be Naso. But next week, the rest of the Jewish world, which is on track to get to Rosh Hashanah on the right time, and we want to be on Rosh Hashanah on the right time, next week the Torah portion is also Naso. So what does the Reform movement do? Naso twice. So today is Naso 1, and next week is Naso 2. That's
or today is not, and next week is
so right. Very good. So that's actually, if you look on the Reform Luach, on the official Reform calendar, this is Naso 1, and next week is Naso 2. So what we're going to do is Naso next week, and this week instead do the Book of Ruth, which has to do with Shavuot. So even though if you're Reformed, technically Shavuot is over, it's okay. You could still learn Ruth.
So it's not so Shavuot. Not so Shavuot.
It depends who you ask. Okay, leave the jokes to me. Leave the jokes to me. Leave the jokes to me. All right. Okay, so what you have here, now, what is Ruth about? Everyone knows that, probably, that the Haftarah for Shavuot is Ruth. We read it yesterday morning. But, if you came to our program 2 nights ago, you know that the story of Ruth is about two things. We covered one on Thursday night. So part of this, if you were here Thursday night at the Leil Tikkun Shavuot, will sound somewhat familiar. But it's about 2 things, and I only said one then, so I could say another one now. And also, they didn't give me enough time. I only had 20 minutes, so it's barely enough time to scratch the surface. So what I wanted to do today, and you have some of the sources that we'll look at here, but primarily all you have is the book of Ruth in its entirety. It's a short book. So what we're going to try to do is get through as much of the book of Ruth as possible. If you didn't get the sheets, or if you're at home, we didn't have a chance to get them online because we were closed on Friday for Shavuot. You can go to sefaria.org, or on your phone or a laptop or whatever, sefaria.org. Click on Tanakh, scroll down to Ruth, and you can follow along if you're home there. You can follow along there as we go. We're just going to be reading the book of Ruth, and the other sources that I brought, I'll just read so you can hear them at home. Again, it's sefaria.org. Click on Tanakh, scroll down until you see Ruth, click on Ruth, and there you'll have the book of Ruth in its entirety in Hebrew and in English. Okay, so where we are, it should be on the back of the sources that I gave you is Ruth chapter 1. Everyone see Ruth chapter 1? This is going to be almost impossible for us to stay on the same page with all these different pages that are not stapled. You know, the one thing that was better about Fort Myers, the temple, the physical plant than here, the rabbi there was equally as good. But in terms of the physical plant, I love when I meet someone from Fort Myers. They say, they have a Jewish community there? I say, yeah, they used to have a great rabbi. But the photocopy machine stapled for you. Here you can't get that here. So that was better there. So it's going to be almost impossible to figure out what page we're on, but actually it's numbered page 1419 on the bottom right, page 1419. Okay. Are the Ansbrucks gone to Colorado?
No, their grandsons have.
Oh, okay. Okay, because once they leave, it throws everything off. We don't know how to begin the class. Okay, Judy, it's to... Do any of you have a copy? Okay. Okay. Okay, here we go. Ruth, chapter 1, verse 1. Let's try and figure out what Ruth is all about.
In the days when the chieftains ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah, with his wife and 2 sons, went to reside in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and his 2 sons were named Mahlon and Chilon. Ephraimites, Bethlehem and Judah. They came to the country of Moab and remained there.
Okay, so there's a lot going on right there. First of all, who are these people? Are these Jews or not Jews? Elimelech sounds Jewish, right? It's Jewish. A man in Bethlehem in Judah. He's from Judah, which means he's a Jew. He's a Jewish family. They're leaving Israel to go to Moab. Why? There's a famine. There's no food. Now, they go there. So what do we know about them? There's a Jewish couple. And Elimelech, which we learn more from the rabbis, was actually a leader of the Jewish people. He was one of those chieftains. And he had a wife named Naomi. Naomi's a nice Jewish name, right? So this is a Jewish, and they have 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Now, Mahlon means, machala means a disease. And Chilion comes from the word like, what's, when there's an animal and then they don't exist anymore? What's that called? Extinction. That's Chilion. So their children's name are sickness and extinction. That's Machlon and Chilion. So it probably means we don't really know what their names were, but something bad is about to happen to them. Okay. So we've already learned a lot just in the first little paragraph there. Okay, we have a Jewish family leaving Israel. Now, what time period is this? So we know that Ruth is the grandmother of King David. King David lived in 1000 BCE. So we're talking about, like maybe 1100, in and around 1100, 1150 BCE, before Jerusalem was founded. And Jerusalem existed, but it wasn't conquered yet by David and the Jews. That wasn't until around 1000. But it's after Joshua's dead and the Jews have already settled the land of Israel. Right? So that's where we are. Okay. Let's keep going.
Abimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth, and they lived there about 10 years. Then those 2, Mahlon and Chilion, also died, so the woman was left without her 2 sons and without her husband.
Right. His friends called him Chili, by the way. That was his nickname. Okay. Okay, now Elimelech, right off the bat, he dies. And leaves Naomi with these 2 sons who get married. They marry non-Jews. How's that go for them? They died. Okay, so now you have Naomi, a widow, with these 2 Moabite women, just the 3 of them, with no men, and no one to support them and no one to take care of them. Okay, clear so far? Okay, let's keep going.
She started out with her daughters-in-law to return to the country of Moab. For in the country of Moab she had heard that the Lord had taken note of his people and given them food. Accompanied by her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and they set out on the road back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Turn back, each of you, to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant that each of you find security in the house of a husband." And she kissed them farewell. They broke into weeping and said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people."
Okay, so this is kind of a strange thing. Why did they come to Moab in the first place? Food, right? They all left because of the famine. And now I guess they hear, look, it's okay. There's some food back in Judah, right? We learned that from verse 6. So they go back. And this woman, Naomi, is saying to the girls, listen, I'm going back to Judah, but it's not a great place. I have no way to support you. I have nobody to support me. Go back to your families in Moab. You have family here. You don't know anyone there. They're not going to love you there. You're poor. You're widows. You're not Jewish. And they say, we don't want to leave you. We want to take care of you. They're not blood. And presumably, the relationship wasn't that long. They got married, and all 3 of them had their husbands die right away. So this is a relatively new relationship. And she's saying to them, I don't think you're going to like it in Judah. I don't know that you want to come back with me. And they say, no, we want to take care of you. Okay, that's what we have so far. Verse 11.
But Naomi replied, "Turn back, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I any more sons in my body who might be husbands for you? Turn back, my daughters, for I am too old to be married. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I were married tonight, and I also bore sons, should you wait for them to grow up? Should you, on their account, debar yourselves from marriage? Oh no, my daughters, my lot is far more bitter than yours, for the hand of the Lord has struck out against me.
Okay, so then on to page 1420. You see the back? They broke into weeping again.
They broke into weeping again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell. But Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods. Go follow your sister-in-law." But Ruth replied, "Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God."
Okay, so that's the famous line, right? Your people will be my people, your God will be my God. This is, essentially her conversion. Now, Orpah leaves and says, you're right. This sounds horrible. And she went into television and had a whole different career, changed her name a little. Okay. All of a sudden, though, it gets theological. Because Orpah doesn't want to leave and says, I'll stick with you. And then Ruth brings up, go back to your gods. And Orpah said, yeah, you're right. One God? Are you nuts? I'm not doing that. I'm staying with Moab. Ruth, at this moment, has some sort of theological moment and says, I'm interested in one God. I'm interested in Eretz Yisrael. And I'm going to continue on with you. Wait, everyone see that? All of a sudden, the first arguments didn't work. The first argument was, no one's going to marry you. I have no more sons to give you. You married my first son. I named him Disease, and he died. And now, go back to your gods. And at that point, verse 15, see, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods. Go with her. And Ruth said, no. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I'll die, and there I'll be buried. Which is an indication that the land is important to her, where she's buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me, if anything but death parts me from you. When Naomi saw how determined she was to go with her, she ceased to argue with her, and the two went on until they reached Bethlehem. Okay. Now, Bethlehem is Hebrew, right? Beit Lechem. Which is ironic, because what does Beit Lechem mean? House of bread, right? They left the famine, now they're going back to the house of... They left because of a famine, now they're going back to the house of bread. Right? You see that? Okay, so there's a lot going on here. Okay, so we're up to verse 20.
When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole city buzzed with excitement over them. The women said, "Can this be Naomi?" "Do not call me Naomi," she replied. "Call me Mara."
Right, what's Mara?
Bitter.
Right. It's also the name of our our preschool director. But that's just a coincidence. You know, it's a tough job. Her name was Naomi. And she moved here, took the job. Now she changed it to... No, I'm just kidding. Mara's great. So she said, "Call me Mara, for Shaddai has made my lot bitter." All right, so she's a bitter woman at this point. Okay, let's keep going. Verse 21.
I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. How can you call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me, when Shaddai has brought misfortune upon me? Thus Naomi returned from the county of Moab. She returned with her daughter-in-law Ruth the Moabite. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest.
Okay, so, you know, in Hebrew, when you meet someone, the way to say nice to meet you, Na'im ma'od. Right? Na'im means pleasant. Naomi, pleasantness. She said, "I'm not so pleasant anymore. Extinction died, disease died, my idiot husband died, right? And my son's married these Moabites, although one of them has turned good. The other one's very successful, although not Jewish, with the TV. And, you know, but for me, things haven't been going so well." Okay, that's chapter 1. So there's a lot more there than we saw. Now, if you were keeping score at home, and you were giving grades, you give Elimelech a grade, what do you give him? So you're like the teacher who says to the student, if there was anything worse than F, that's what I would give you. Right? But unfortunately, it's the lowest I can do. So that's why he gives up on the land of Israel. You notice no one else left. Everyone else stuck around during the famine. There was no mass exodus. He was the leader of the people. And he left when times got tough. And he's punished. He dies. Machlon and Kilion, who start off, already above par. So, you know, with their names, they die right away. They're clearly, and they don't do anything about it. Naomi, I don't know, you give her like a B, C+, she's kind of pessimistic. Orpah, you know, fine, B, you know, nobody's asking much of her. But Ruth, I mean, come on. Ruth is the hero. Ruth, you give her an A+++. She does everything. But then you have to ask yourself, what's the difference between Ruth and the performance of everyone else? I don't want to give it away yet. Obviously, Ruth is the hero, but we want to try to figure out why. Okay, yeah.
Isn't she kind of like Abraham?
She's a lot like Abraham. But very good. You weren't there Thursday night. Well, okay, so you knew that even without me telling you. That's very good. Okay, don't give it away, though.
Okay.
Oh, you looked at the sheets.
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay, then I'm impressed. All right, chapter 2. Chapter 2. Erica, would you mind? Verse 1.
Now Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a man of substance of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "I would like like to go to the fields and glean among the ears of grain behind someone who may show me kindness. Yes, daughter, go, she replied. And off she went. She came and gleaned in a field behind the reapers, and as luck would have it, it was the piece of land belonging to Boaz, who was Elimelech's family. Presently Boaz arrived from Bethlehem. He greeted the reapers. The Lord be with you. And they responded, the Lord bless you. Boaz said to the servant who was in charge of the reapers, whose girl is that? The servant in charge of the reapers replied, she is a Moabite girl who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. She has been on her feet ever since she came this morning. She has rested but little in the hut. Boaz said to Ruth, listen to me, daughter. Don't go to the gleaning in another field. Don't go elsewhere, but stay here close to my girls. Keep your eyes on the field they are reaping and follow them. I have ordered the men not to molest you, and when you are thirsty, go to the jars and drink some of the water that the men have drawn. She protested herself with her face to the ground and said to him, why are you so kind as to single me out when I am a foreigner?
Okay, so what happens here is, now for anyone, if you're watching at home, we're in Ruth chapter 2, verse 8, or we just finished, verse 8. If you don't have sheets, you can maybe follow along on safaria.org or chabad.org or whatever. Why is Ruth surprised that Boaz pays any attention to her? Because she is a... Right. And so that gives us, it's not a great feeling, because the Torah tells the Jewish people 36 times how nice you're supposed to be to the foreigners. But she's not feeling the love from the rest of the, she's out there working the whole time. She, barely taking a break, and she's not feeling, and then all of a sudden Boaz, who's this kind guy, shows interest in her, and she's surprised because nobody else is giving her the time of day. You see that? Okay. Okay. And he says, I've ordered the men not to molest you, which means they might have. Right? If there was no chance that they would bother her, he wouldn't have to order them not to. Or maybe he just wants to reassure her because she doesn't know these people. So it could be that too. But either way, she's not feeling audacious hospitality. The URJ would be very disappointed. Remember, it doesn't matter. Okay. Verse 10. David, would you mind?
Also, I noticed they used the word, I think you read that one, but I'll read it again.
Yeah, I don't know. We're somewhere in there.
Then my question is, why the word foreigner, not stranger? Yeah.
I don't have the Hebrew in front of me. I don't know what the Hebrew is. It's probably the same thing. It's probably ger. Oh, Nochriya is Nochriya. Nochriya means a foreigner, but it alludes to someone who has a different god. That type of word. Well, wait till they find out historically who she is. Then she's going to say, how do you like me now? Okay.
Boaz said in reply, I've been told all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother in the land of your birth and came to the people you had not known before. May the Lord reward your deeds. May you have full recompense from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wing you have sought refuge. She answered, you are most kind, my Lord, to comfort me and to speak gently to your maidservant, though I am not so much as one of your maidservants. At mealtime, Boaz came to her. Come over here and partake of the meal, and dip your morsels in the vinegar. So
and back then, there was nothing more romantic that you could say to a woman than dip your morsel. I mean, that was like, that was something. So, and the rabbis say That's the moment she fell in love. When she tasted the vinegar, she said, this is the guy for me. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So not hummus, nothing. Just vinegar. So she sat down beside the reapers. He handed her roasted grain, and she ate her fill and had some left over.
Right. I had to bring in a chef to read that part to make it even funnier. You know. All right.
When she got up again to glean, Boaz gave orders to his workers. You are not only to let her glean amongst the sheaves you are to let her glean amongst the sheaves without interference, but you must also put some stalks out of the heaps and leave them for her to glean and not scold her.
Okay, now, you notice also, when we think of Shavuot and the harvest season, there's a harvest story as well, right? So there's that connection there. I spoke about that yesterday morning at services, the connection between, so you have that. So we're not going to get into that again, but obviously Shavuot is a harvest festival holiday, and this is just happens to fit Shavuot, not only because Ruth converts to Judaism and accepts Torah, but because it's a harvest story. And the story wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for food, right? Naomi never would have ended up in Moab, never would have met Ruth if there was no famine. If she never would have met Ruth, Ruth wouldn't have come back and married Boaz. If she never came back and married Boaz, she wouldn't have been the grandmother of King David and so on. Right? So all the kings of Israel are going to come from this story because every king has to come from David. So this is a big, including the Messiah. So it's a very powerful story. Okay, where are we up to now?
She gleaned.
17?
Yeah.
Okay, verse 17.
She gleaned the field until evening. Then she beat out what she gleaned. It was about an ephah of barley, and carried it back to her town. When her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and when she took out and gave it to her, and what she had left over after eating her fill, her mother-in-law asked her, "What did you glean today?"
Where? Where did you glean
Where
today?
did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be he who took out such generous notice of you. So she told her mother-in-law, whom she had worked with, saying, "The name of the man whom I work today is Boaz."
Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he of the Lord, who has not failed in his kindness to the living or to the dead." For Naomi explained to her daughter-in-law, "The man is related to us. He is one of our redeeming kinsmen." Ruth,
So what does that mean? I don't know if we did this in the Torah recently, but a redeeming kinsman, yeah, we did this like a few weeks ago. We're talking about v'chi yamuch. If someone becomes destitute, then one of your closest relatives, if not your brother, if not your parent, a cousin, whatever, they're required to redeem you and bring you out of poverty. So you remember, one of the things we talked about is nobody should ever be poor because you should always have someone who should come in and help you along. And so you're starting to see the Torah come into action that, yeah, not only is Boaz being really nice to us, or being nice to you, and that's a surprise, but the truth is he's required to. Because we're related, and if you're poor, not to mention, you're a widow. So it's also supposed to be helping you because you're a widow. Now, what you could say is, yeah, but she's a foreigner. And you're not really related. Technically, right? You're not really related. But he is related to Naomi. And so what you see about Boaz is he could bring arguments to the court to say, technically, I don't need to help these people. But he doesn't do that. He gives them the benefit of the doubt and says, this is what I'm supposed to do. I could get out of it if I wanted to, maybe. But that's not who I am. So Boaz also, you see him following the letter of the law, which is really nice. Okay. Let's keep going. I lost my spot. Where do we get up to?
Ruth the Moabite.
21.
Ruth the Moabite said, "He even told me, 'Stay close by my workers until all my harvest is finished.' And Naomi answered her daughter-in-law Ruth, 'It is best, daughter, that you go out with his girls and not be annoyed in some other field. So she stayed close to the maidservants of Boaz and gleaned until the barley harvest and the wheat harvest were finished. Then she stayed at home with her mother-in-law. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her daughter, I must seek a home for you where you may be happy. Now there is a kinsman, Boaz, whose girl you were close to. He will be winnowing barley and threshing floor tonight, on the threshing floor tonight. So bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, go down to the threshing floor, but do not disclose yourself to the man until he has finished eating and drinking.
Right. Threshing floor was the name of a nightclub. That's where he was.
When he lies down, note the place where he lies down, and go over and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what you are to do. She replied, I will do everything you tell me. She went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. Boaz ate and drank, and in a cheerful mood went to lie down beside the grain pile. Then she went over stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. In the middle of the night, the man gave a start and pulled back. There was a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked, and she replied, I am your handmaid Ruth. Spread your robe over your handmaid, for you are a redeeming kinsman. He exclaimed, Be blessed of the Lord, daughter. Your latest deed of loyalty is greater than the first, in that you have not turned to younger men, whether poor or rich. And now, daughter, have no fear. I will do in your behalf whatever you ask, for all the elders of my town know what a fine woman you are. But while it is true I am a redeeming kinsman, there is another redeemer closer than I. Stay for the night, then in the morning, if he will act as a redeemer, good, let him redeem. But if he does not want to act as a redeemer for you, I will do so myself as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning.
Right, so one of the things Boaz says is, for all the elders of the town know what a fine woman you are. And there's a note there, C, elders of the town, says the gate of my people. Because the elders or the judges used to hang out at the courts were basically at the gate of each town. That's where they had the court cases. So why does he say that? I think what it means is that it's understood in town by the court that you're a monotheist. In other words, I can marry you because you're Jewish. See that? That's what that means. If there was, anyone who thought maybe that you were still interested in many gods, or if you were willing to be like what's called a resident alien, a ger toshav, which is someone who accepts the Noahide laws but not fully Jewish, then you could live here, but it couldn't marry you. But you have made it clear in your time here that you don't worship idols and that you're interested in serving one God. And whatever you've done has been made clear to the people who need to know, which is the court. She didn't take the URJ Introduction to Judaism course or read whatever. But whatever she did at that point, back then to convert, you just had to not believe in other gods. There was, for men, if you weren't circumcised, you had that. But for basically, if you wanted to, it was much different than it is now. If you wanted to convert, you just said, okay, I believe in one God, and if they believed you, then it was it. So this is what Ruth had done, and that's why he says that. And now he wants to make sure that everything's according to the letter of the law. So if no one on the hierarchy of redemption comes before me who would have a right to marry you before me, then this will work. Okay, and that's where.
Was there an anomaly to Ruth that made her different than all of these other monothelites who also just became Jews? What was her anomaly that changed?
Compared to who?
Compared to all these other people that you say were easy to convert by them just saying, I believe in one God.
So the only other person we have to compare her to is Orpah. And, that's the fork in the road where They both say, we both want to take care of you, Naomi. We'll both go back with you and take care of you. And then Naomi says, well, no, go back to your gods. And Orpah says, yeah, you're right. And, she liked shrimp. There were things that there were steps Orpah wasn't willing to take. At that point, Naomi says, yes. Monotheism, Judaism, I'm in. And that's the fork in the road. We don't have anyone else to compare it to in the book.
All the people who left Mitzrayim that were not Jewish, who went with the Gershons, none of them converted.
Well, so they were the Eruv Rav. They were the mixed multitude. But the people who were the mixed multitude were the Chartumim. They were Pharaoh's magicians. And they were those people who left, who went with Moses. They're the ones who built the golden calf. And they're the ones who said the magic potions that built the golden calf, and they all died.
So that whole generation.
Well, yeah, that group of people, they all died because Moses came and killed them because they were the ones responsible for building the golden calf. Now, did other people maybe convert along the way once they got to the land of Israel? Yeah, maybe, but not a whole lot.
I was always the assumption that Ruth was really the first true convert.
No, she's the first one to have a book written about her. Moses' wife is a convert. Jethro is a convert. Abraham and Sarah are converts.
So what process did they go through? No process.
Just, I believe in one God. Right? That's that we know of. There's nothing in rabbinic literature. There's definitely nothing in the Torah about Sipporah's conversion. People say, well, Moses married a Cushite woman. Like, really? You think Moses is going to marry a woman who's not Jewish? Moses? So she converted. But, and we see her performing some of the mitzvahs. In fact, I'm going to show you one in a minute. But there's no, there was no ceremony. There was no, there was no bagel brunch. There was. Right. Okay. Now where are we? 13, chapter 3?
Chapter 3,
Okay.
14.
Okay, Sherry,
So she lay at the feet until dawn. She rose before one person could distinguish another, for he thought, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, hold out the shawl you are wearing. She held it while he measured out 6 measures of barley, and he put it on her back. When she got back to the town, she came to her mother-in-law, who asked, how is it with you, daughter? She told her that the man had done for her, and she added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying to me, do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. And Naomi said, stay there, daughter, till you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. Meanwhile, Boaz had gone to the gate and sat down there. And now the Redeemer whom Boaz had mentioned passed by. He called, come over and sit down here, so-and-so. And he came over and sat down. Then Boaz took 10 elders of the town and said, be seated here, and they sat down. He said to the Redeemer, Naomi, now returned from the country of Moab, and sell the piece of land which belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. I thought I should disclose the matter to you and say, acquire it in the presence of those seated here and the presence of the elders of my people. If you are willing to redeem it, redeem. But if you will not redeem, tell me that I may know. For there is no one to redeem but you, and I come after you. I am willing to redeem it, he replied. Boaz continued, when you acquire the property from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabite, you must also acquire the wife of the deceased, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon his estate. The Redeemer replied, then I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own estate. You take over my redemption, for I am unable to exercise it. Now, this was formerly done in Israel in cases of redemption or exchange to validate any transaction. One man would take off his sandal and hand it to the other. Such was the practice in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, acquire for yourself, he drew off his sandal. And Boaz said to the elders and to the rest of the people, you are witnesses today that I am acquiring from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. I'm also acquiring Ruth the Moabite.
the wife of Machlon, as my wife, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon his estate, that the name of the deceased may not disappear from among his kinsmen and from the gate of his hometown. You are witnesses today. All the people at the gate and the elders answered, we are. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built up the house of Israel, prosper in Ephrathah, and perpetuate your name in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the offspring to which the Lord will give you by this young woman. So Boaz married Ruth, and she became his wife, and he cohabitated with her. The Lord let her conceive, and she bore a son. And the woman said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be perpetuated in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain your old age, for he is born of your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons. Naomi took the child and held it to her bosom. She became the foster mother, and the woman neighbors gave him a name, saying, A son is born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, father of David.
Okay, so you could ask, why do we need this whole story? Who cares? What does this have to do with Jewish history? And then you get to this part. And say, whoa. And all of a sudden you say, King David's grandmother was not a Jew at birth. She converted. It's pretty incredible. And then you get the line of Perez begot Hezron, Hezron begot Ram begot Aminadav, Aminadav begot Nachshon, Nachshon begot Salmon begot Boaz, Boaz begot Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. Okay, so now you've read the whole book of Ruth. It only took us 47 minutes. And we explained a little bit what it's about, but now let's get to 2 points. So we have the holiday of Pesach, which celebrates the Jewish people leaving Egypt and commemorates the whole story. And then you have the countdown of the Omer until you get to 50 days when you get to Shavuot. But the difference between Passover and Shavuot in terms of what the Jews did is stark. During Pesach, I'm not talking about the 210 years they were slaves, but during the period of Pesach, from the time when Moses comes to Pharaoh and says, let my people go, until the time that they leave and walk through the Red Sea, the Jewish people don't really do anything. They're really just sitting there. God is waging the battle against Pharaoh himself. Right? The 10 plagues, there's no war. The Jews never pick up any spears or weapons or anything. The war, the plagues, are from God. Now, Moses holds things up once in a while. But the Jewish activity at this time is very, very passive. Now, as soon as the Passover story ends, and they get on the other side of the Red Sea. I mean, they walked through the Red Sea, but they were just going for a walk. Who was holding up the water? God. Who was hurling the Egyptians into the water? God. There was no fighting. The Jews were just going for a hike. And it was very beautiful with the water, it's like hiking through the waterfalls of, En-Gedi or something. Niagara, whatever. But now, once they get to the other side, they start to journey. And what's the first thing that happens? They have a real war against Amalek. And they actually have to fight themselves against Amalek. And they fight and they win the war. And then they have to journey and there's these other people coming at them. And they have to be careful to go around so they don't, provoke wars. And then they have to build a camp. And when they build a camp, they go ultimately to Mount Sinai. And they get the Torah. And what do the Jews say? What's the first word they say? Na'aseh, and then v'nishma. Na'aseh, we'll do it. So what I'm trying to point out is, the holiday of Shavuot is active. They're doing. They're camping. They're traveling away from Egypt. They're fighting the war themselves. God isn't fighting it for them. They're going to Mount Sinai. They're building a camp. And then the first thing they say is, we'll do it actively. And then they take the Torah, and then they have to live the Torah. It's about doing. Passover is more passive. There's nothing, they don't really do anything except watch and then go along for the ride. Okay. Now, Ruth is the Haftarah that we read on Shavuot. And what Ruth really is a comparison between active and passive, between actually doing and sitting around and doing nothing. So if I look at the characters and I put on one side of the board, Elimelech, Machlon, Kilion, Orpah, and most importantly, the most important, what was the name of the guy who was closer in relationship to redeeming Ruth? In English, they called him so-and-so. In Hebrew, is Ploni Almoni. That's what he's called, Ploni Almoni, which means John Doe. That's what I mean. We don't know his name.
Because he didn't step up.
He didn't step up. He was passive. He said, I'm going to have to marry her too. She's just annoying. Not interested. Whatever. The baggage I'm not interested in. I'll take the land. But the woman, forget it. So his punishment is that his name's never recorded. And for the rest of time, people refer to him as so-and-so, which is not how you want to be remembered. On the other hand, you have Ruth and Boaz, who at every step along the way take the correct action. Yes, I'll go with you just to take care of you. Yeah, but your God will be my God. And what does Ruth do as soon as she gets there? I want to go work. I want to go out in the fields, and she stayed up until late at night out there working harder than anybody until she gets noticed. Then Naomi tells her, go and, wait till he's eating and go lie by his bed and say this and do that. I'll go do it. And she does it. And so the reason, reason one, that Ruth is with Shavuot is because when a Jew accepts Torah, the whole story of Ruth is that she converted, she accepted Torah. But the whole story of accepting Torah, what Shavuot is all about, is you got to do it. This isn't one of those religions where you just say, well, I believe, so I'm good. You can't just say, I believe in Sukkot. You got to build the sukkah. You got to take the palm. You got to take the etrog. You got to shake it. You can't just say, I believe in Yom Kippur. You got to fast. You got to daven. You got to show up. You got to wear white clothes and ridiculous shoes. Right? That's part of it. You can't just say, I believe in the Sabbath. You got to come here and study. You got to daven. You got to have the meals. You got to bake the challah. It's not a religion of belief. It's a religion of belief, but it's a religion of action. You can't just say, I believe in charity. You've got to give it. You know what has replaced actually doing things these days? Posting. Posting. I don't agree with such and such an issue. I'm going to take a real stand. You're not going to believe what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it on Instagram. And that will change the world. That's the equivalent of doing nothing. But that's not what Ruth would have done if she felt strongly about something. So that's number one. That's all of what we just did was to make that point. That if you're going to accept Torah, you got to do it. And that's who Ruth was. And that's why this story is about her, because that's what Shavuot is supposed to be about. Na'aseh v'nishma. We'll do it. And then we'll listen to what's in it. Na'aseh. Aseh, la'asot, to do. To make. To create something. Okay. Now, part two, I explained on, I don't know when it was, last night? 2 nights ago? 2 nights ago. The Leil Tikkun Shavuot. But in 5 minutes, there's one more piece to this. So I just want to show you the first source on the sheet, which is a midrash. Now, the real hero, and Jeff alluded to it. You didn't allude to it, you nailed it. No, it was great. The real hero of Shavuot should be Moses, because he's the one who gets the Torah. But it's not. It's Abraham. And Ruth has a lot more in common with Abraham than Moses. So look what it says. There was this moment when Moses went up to get the Torah, according to the Midrash, that the angel said, don't give the Torah to the Jews. They're not going to follow it. They complain about everything. And Moses says to the angels, were you in Egypt? Were you slaves? You should have the Torah? The Torah is for humans. This isn't for your world. You won't understand it. And at first the angels wanted to attack Moses, according to the Midrash. So this is what it said. At that moment, the angels sought to harm Moses. God shaped Moses' face to appear like Abraham. And God said to the angels, are you not embarrassed before them? Is this not the one who you descended and you ate in his home? God then turned to Moses and said, the Torah was given to you only in the merit of Abraham, which is a crazy thing to say to Moses on Mount Sinai. So what's so great about Abraham? So what God does, the angels are ready to attack Moses. And God makes his face look like Abraham, and the angels step back and say, oh, him we wouldn't harm. And so why? Because there's this scene in Genesis where the angels came and they ate in the home of Abraham. So there's two problems with that. If you were there 2 nights ago, you know, don't shout it out because you'll steal my thunder. But there are two problems with that. One is there are millions of angels. There are only 3 of them who were with Abraham. 2 of them came to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and 1 came to heal him from his circumcision. There are only 3 angels. There are 1 million angels up there. And the second problem is angels don't eat. They go through the motions, but there's nothing, they're images made to look like humans, but they're not humans. They don't have colitis. They don't have irritable bowel syndrome like Jews do. Right? They didn't have to deal with this. So then we wonder, well, why does God love Abraham? And if you wonder why God loves Abraham, you shouldn't, because there's a verse that tells us. Genesis chapter 18, verse 19. So it's right here, the second verse on the source sheet. God tells us why I loved Abraham. For I loved him, because he will instruct his children and his household after him, that they will guard the path of God to perform acts of righteousness and justice. Which means to say that God loves Abraham for 2 reasons. One, Abraham represents chesed, kindness. And 2, he represents passing that kindness on to the next generation. So why then, when God says to the angels, you should be afraid of Abraham, and they are, in a way that they're not afraid of Moses, God brings up the scene of when the angels ate at his house. And it makes no sense because they didn't really eat. Not only angels were there, but something else happened at that moment that impressed the angels. What was it? So if you look down to the second to last source, Exodus Rabbah 48:13. And Abraham ran to the cattle, and he took a tender and good calf, and he gave it to the youth. So that's the verse from the Torah when the angels came into his house. Who's the youth? Rashi tells you from here, this was Yishmael. He gave it to Yishmael in order to energize him in mitzvot, which means to say they were impressed that Abraham was using that moment to teach kindness to the next generation, to Ishmael. Now, Ishmael turned out to be no good, but Abraham was trying, and eventually it went through Isaac. But the whole point of the Torah is that Ruth represents kindness and action. And that's who she takes care of Naomi, even though there's nothing in it for her. She goes back to Bethlehem, even though there's nothing in it for her. She's going to have a life of grinding poverty, but she's doing it because she's kind and she wants to do the right thing and take care of other people. And that is what Torah is all about. Torah, the whole point of Torah is connecting, is passing kindness on to the next generation. That's what it means to be Jewish. That's what accepting Torah is all about. And it's for that reason, besides the first reason that I showed you that Ruth is active, but even more of a reason. The reason we read Ruth on Shavuot is because Shavuot is about accepting Torah. But accepting Torah isn't just about accepting Torah. Accepting Torah is about a commitment to pass chesed, kindness, on to the next generation. And Ruth gets that, or at least is the embodiment of that, from Abraham. That wasn't Moses' thing. How many times, I used this line the other night, but how many times in the Torah do you see Moses playing ball with his sons in the backyard? How many times do you see Moses interacting with his children at all? 0. Most people don't even know the names of Moses' kids because nothing happens to them. Now, it's Eliezer and Gershom, but the one thing we know about Moses and his kids, it's the last source on the sheet, Exodus 4, 24 and 25. The one time he had a chance to be a good father, at a night encampment on the way, God encountered him. By the way, unfortunately, when I cut and pasted this, it actually put the 4-letter name of God. So if you could hand me these back, we can't throw these out. So the ones that have just that sheet, I'll bury them. Or I'll put them in the Geniza, which is also, Geniza is a fancy word for a drawer in my office, where we put stuff that we can't throw away. So please don't throw this page away. You can just return them up here. But God encountered him and sought to kill him. So Zipporah, Moses' wife, God sought to kill Moses. God sought to kill Moses. How crazy is that? This is like one of those verses you're like, was that always there? It was always there. Imagine Moses writing this himself. God sought to kill me. Wait, what? Why? What did he do? So Zipporah, his wife, took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched his legs with it, saying, "You are truly a bridegroom of blood to me," because Moses forgot to circumcise his son. The one thing we know about Moses passing on Torah to the next generation is the one time he had a chance, he didn't do it. And Zipporah, his wife, saved him. Whereas when you look at Abraham, his whole life, the whole narrative we have about him, is he marries Sarah and she can't have a son, and it's so painful. He wants to have a son right away and he can't. And then, okay, so fine. So he goes to Hagar because she can have a son, but it doesn't work out. And then God comes to Abraham and says, "You're going to have another son." He said, "I don't need another son. Can you fix the one I got?" That's what he said. "Help me with Ishmael." And God says, "No, it's not going to work. You need to have Isaac." So then he has Isaac, finally. And then what God says, "You finally had him. You're so excited. Now go kill him." And Abraham's tortured, and he goes and does it. But Abraham's whole essence is about being able to pass on chesed, kindness, to the next generation, because Abraham knows if it dies with him, what good is it? We don't get that from Moses. And the next person we really get that from, the one who accepts Torah, who's interested in passing kindness on to the next generation in an active way, is Ruth. And so ultimately, Shavuot, yes, we say, great. This is the day we got the Torah. Okay, fine. What does that do for us? Nothing. I mean, it's nice. It's like it's like if you celebrate your anniversary with your spouse, but you don't talk to them the rest of the year. You know, it is useless. So, okay, we celebrate the anniversary. But what we really do is commit to be active for the year going forward. We're going to live the Torah in a way that's kind and generous. And that's something that you can pass on to the next generation. Okay. Shabbat Shalom. All right. Good. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you. So what happened? We're not going to meet with that guy? I looked him up. He's a pretty impressive character. Jody met them. Yeah, I have him with Jody. Jody said he's very nice. Okay. That sounds good. Yeah, I like that.
Amen.